Welcome to Humans of Fintech, the podcast where I share the inspiring stories of diverse leaders bringing equity to financial systems through fintech. I'm Nicole Casperson. Nina, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Humans of Fintech. I'm so excited that you're here.
I'm so excited too.
In the flesh.
Yes.
In New York City.
In New York City.
In Brooklyn, specifically.
In Brooklyn.
I know.
Through the traffic and all.
Oh my gosh. How's it feel? You literally flew in last night.
I literally flew in last night. It feels weird being back in New York. It's been a while. I love New York.
Yeah.
What a great city.
I mean,
but it's chaotic.
It is.
Chaotic
it is.
Good though.
I would give that to India as well, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, people ask me all the time, like, how is India? And really my initial reaction is like, India is all encompassing. It is all of the things. I mean,
consumes you.
Yes. What a, it's like both overwhelming and beautiful and magical all at the same time. And it's like, and I feel that way about New York as well, though India is a much larger.
Yes. Slightly bigger.
Just a little bigger.
Just a little bit. Like just a few more people.
Yeah, just a few more million, whatever people.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, but I loved it out there. And your father is from India.
Yes. So
tell us about your parents.
My father is from the northeast of India, a state called Odisha. Mm-hmm. Fun fact, is one of the poorest states in India, which I think makes my father's story even more impressive to me personally. He grew up in a tiny rural village, and I think his story is very much the immigrant story, the American immigrant story. And he really studied hard. He was one of 5 children, and education was everything in his family and both sides of my family, actually. And my grandfather was a bus conductor. My grandmother took care of everyone. But I think from fairly humble beginnings, he studied hard, got into some great schools. The entire family kind of pitched in for him to get that plane ticket to come to the U.S., where he did his master's degree. So that's my dad's side.
Wow.
My mother's from Taiwan. And I always have to, especially in the U.S., I always have to clarify that Taiwan, like when I say I'm Taiwanese, that does not mean I'm Thai. Just a little clarification there.
If you're confused.
Taiwan and Thailand are different places.
Gosh, I hope my listeners know. Anyway,
yes, Taiwan is a tiny, very important island off the coast of China. Largest manufacturer of semiconductors and very relevant right now geopolitically. But my mother is from Taipei, and she immigrated similarly, around the same time actually as my dad. For similar reasons, she was pursuing a master's degree in computer science, and they both they didn't know each other. They both ended up in Texas, of all places.
Wow.
Random. It was very coming to America. And my mother was in Houston. She was in Houston. My dad was in Arlington. They had a bunch of friends, and I guess at that time, it was like the late 80s, where they said, hey, there's this place it wasn't even called Silicon Valley at the time. It was, there's this place in California, they're hiring engineers, we should all go. And so basically all those people who graduated around the same time got in cars and just drove to California. And that is now the Silicon Valley today.
Wow.
So they are, OG dot-com boom engineers. I grew up in the Silicon Valley. People always kind of do a double take, and they're like, you're from the Silicon Valley? Like, what is that?
Are people from there?
People live there? I'm like, yes. All those people that build your apps and make the internet work. Yeah.
They're born and raised there. Yes, and then they never leave. No,
but truly, they don't.
Oh, well, yeah.
They do not leave. Like, oh, man. It is very interesting being back. I was back for 3 weeks, and everyone is, getting married, having kids, lovely. And everyone just kind of like hangs out with the same people, which is great. I obviously left the country. I've been living abroad for over 10 years now, so it is just such a different lifestyle to me. But there are certain cliche things about Silicon Valley kids where you kind of boomerang back after uni and go work at Meta or Google, which is great.
Yeah.
They have great stock options, I'm sure.
Great benefits, maybe.
Great
perhaps,
benefits, all that good
sorts of things.
stuff. Yeah, birthdays in Napa, yearly trip to Hawaii, all good.
Casual lifestyle.
Yeah.
But then how interesting is it for you to really have then your own immigrant experience
Absolutely.
when you moved to, did you move to London?
So I have lived in 3 different European countries. I actually first moved to Paris. I moved to Paris to study. So I was studying at a school there called Sciences Po. I've since been told, I didn't realize at the time, that is kind of the equivalent of Harvard.
Okay.
And so great news for me because I didn't get into Harvard here. So I went and studied.
So I went to
there.
Paris.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, Ma, are you proud of me?
Oh, God.
Still not there. Asian parents, it'd be like that sometimes.
Are you proud of me yet?
Cut deep.
I know.
But, oops, sorry. I first moved to Paris, and that was a huge culture shock. I loved it, though, being in Europe, and that's what ultimately made me decide to pursue a life in Europe. And so I then moved to the UK. Briefly lived in Austria as well. So I've kind of like hopped around, and now London is home. So the immigrant experience has been very interesting, also given that it comes from a place of privilege. So I think a lot of people will refer to me as an expat. I don't love that term expat because I think there is this purposeful delineation of you're an expat if you are wealthy, or often if you are white, living in a place that is non-white or is, an emerging market or something like that. Don't love the term, but we're all immigrants at the end of the day, whether you're an expat or you're a refugee, right? And so it definitely comes with privilege and passport privilege to come from the US, but there are definitely some challenges that are difficult to overcome when you move countries, and that remains true regardless of your socioeconomic background.
I mean, and even though you came from the U.S., I mean, your parents are immigrants. You're brown.
I am brown.
It's a different, no, me brown.
Me? Have you?
It's a different. Have you seen me? Have you seen this beauty? Yeah, no, it's. But that's a whole other thing. That's like a whole different experience, right? And so you're going from, I don't know what Silicon Valley is like in terms of predominantly white, but I've got a feeling it maybe is. But although probably a large Asian population as well.
Lots of Asians. Yeah. And it's been really interesting to watch over the 30 years of my life, where it's like we have some really banging like Chinese, Taiwanese, Korean, Japanese food, Indian food now. But it wasn't always that way. And even now, in hindsight, I think about some experiences that my dad would tell me about, or overhearing them growing up and thinking, oh, it's weird that this is happening to my dad. And now as an adult being like, oh, that was racism. Oh. Understood.
Got it.
Understood. Or even, like my mother was a QA engineer for many, many decades, and constantly being passed over for promotions and that sort of thing, because being East Asian, it was like, oh, you're an East Asian woman, so you're docile and quiet. And you can't be in a managerial position.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So it is interesting how far we've come, but also how far we still have to go.
Yeah, no, it is so apparent. I mean, it makes me think of, it's funny, my mom's experience is that, she came to America and found her knight in shining armor, if you will, in my very, very white father. Jeff, we love Jeff. And so, but it's funny because there's been times when me and Anton, we've sat down with her and she's like, I've never experienced racism. And I'm like, oh yeah. And
tell me more about that.
Tell me about it. She's like, but then she proceeds to tell us the story of how when we were growing up as kids and she would take us to school. And me and my mom's like a darker skinned Filipino woman, and she and her kids are not. And so she just looks very different than us. And so she was like, these women would think I was the nanny. They never thought that these were my kids. And ever since then, she's like, so you know what I do now? I make sure, and she's been doing it her whole life. She wears big jewelry, and she's always dressed up, and she always has her makeup done, and she's very glamorous. And I love that about my mom, but it's
fascinating.
But it was a response, and I was like, so Mom, that's racism. You've experienced it,
How interesting, because
Yeah.
we're both mixed race, aren't we? And so I also don't share the same surname as my mother. And so I very clearly remember instances of that where it's like, we're looking for Nina Mohanty's mom. And my mother would kind of pop them like, that's me, like this tiny little Asian woman. And they'd be like, no, Nina Mohanty's mom. this brown girl's mom. And my mom would be like, that's me. And it was just,
Mom.
yeah. And like that's my biological mother. Like I came out, people to this day, there's certain facial features that we have in common. I think when they hear me speaking Mandarin with my mom, then they're like, okay, we see what happened here. But it is definitely, it's so interesting being mixed race as well.
It
That's
is.
like an added
It
dimension
is.
to it.
Yeah, being biracial is like a whole special experience. I like wish we had our own club because, yeah, and because it's usually whenever someone asks me about my own story, I always have to describe it as like, well, growing up biracial, especially when your other half is white, it's like this weird thing because you like have all this privilege, but also like you're not allowed in these like specific circles because you're just not white enough.
You never fit in.
Yes, you never.
anywhere.
Yeah, and then even like in in an Asian group, they're like, do we want her here?
Yes. Exactly.
But anyway, so it is a weird dynamic, but we've leveraged it as our superpower, and now I want to kind of start talking about like money, and fintech because
talk about money.
I'm like
power.
Anyways, money. But I'm mostly just curious, like, so who did teach you a lot about money, and I think that you can inherently learn. I learned a lot about money through my parents, whether they realize it or not, just from watching them move.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
So I would say that they both took that on, the teaching about money. It's funny in hindsight, my dad has this habit where he would always, if we would go out for like a treat for ice cream or something, or even buying us, or having a family dinner or at a restaurant or something, which was always a very special thing. My dad would always take a bite or two, and he would always say, I've got to take my tax. And we would always laugh and be like, ha 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 ha, tax, like dad tax. But it was actually probably the most formative thing because I am obsessed about tax all the time. Like for someone who is not an accountant, I am constantly thinking about what are the tax implications of like every action that I take in life. So that was instilled in me very early on, which is like nothing is really for free. And we always have to kind of factor in that there's going to be a cut of it going somewhere. I think my mother did a lot of the more basic financial literacy stuff. A lot of the savings habits. I imagine you are as well, of the generation where we had checkbooks and we were taught to balance our checkbooks.
Oh yeah.
These days, kids don't know. But piggy banks. I had this like massive pink piggy bank that was like dressed as a ballerina because I trained in ballet. All the typical. I also had a Barney piggy bank, which was, that thing was heavy. It was filled up. It was
save.
The pocket change was in exchange for work, and I think my parents instilled that in me very early on. And my cousin from India he was in town the past few weeks, and we drove past this restaurant where I was a waitress during high school. And he's like, wow, you started working really early. And my mom was like, oh yeah, Nina was babysitting when she was 12. And then, she started working as a waitress, and I've been a barista and a bartender and all these things. And I think my parents are very stereotypically Asian in that they wanted me to focus on my studies. But in hindsight, they have actually given me credit for putting in work and like understanding labor and the value of a dollar. And that has stayed with me since. So I do not take for granted where, sometimes I'll do speaking engagements now where I get paid thousands of dollars or pounds. But even though, that has changed from being on minimum wage, working in high school, every dollar still means a lot to me. I also think, though, importantly, and this is a very immigrant child thing, I don't know if it resonates with you, is for my family in particular, we were always in this scarcity mindset.
Always.
I think we still are. And it's funny, I was trying to put together a TikTok for Bloom about like five signs that you might be an immigrant child type thing. And I know you're half Filipino and and you actually have a name for it, the balikbayan boxes, like sending boxes of stuff home. We don't really have a name for it in India, but my entire life we would hoard stuff.
Yes.
And then either bring it to India for the cousins or for whoever. Or like my dad would have like 50 lipsticks. I'm like, who are these for? He's like, it's for your aunties in India.
That's exactly right.
So either it goes in the box that's coming with us to India, or it just gets hoarded and it stays there. And I look at my parents' garage and it's like, whoa, nothing gets thrown out. Broken things.
Yes, being hoarders is just
My parents have a broken Vitamix and they will not get rid of it because they're like, this was expensive.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't work. And like, well, we could get it fixed. I'm like, okay, we'll do that then. Like, either get rid of it or fix it, but it just sits there. And so I think that has affected my personal money mindset, in that I had to overcome the scarcity mindset. And of course, so much privilege in being able to do that and having therapy to talk through why is no amount of savings ever enough? For the longest time, I just chucked all of my money in a savings account and just kept growing this like pot. And it was finally to the point where it's like, okay, you have 6 months of like pay you could live off of, and it still wasn't enough.
no.
And I wasn't even investing at that point. So I think that learning about money also affects your money mindset, the way that you approach it, the way you feel about money. And money is so emotional inherently that has followed me around as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that. And it's so true. I mean, the scarcity mindset is something that I think I'm still, I've been able to work through as an adult, and I'm still working through, right? And then now it's like the roles are reversed, where I'm teaching my parents, right, about how to get out of that mindset. Because, even my dad not being an immigrant, he grew up a poor kid, and he still just has that as well. And I mean, him and my mom have been together for so long that their brains are like the same. Anyway, so they like both very much have this, and they have this very like almost like waiting to get screwed over mindset, which I think is tied into scarcity, which is very much scarcity mindset, right? Like you're just waiting for the thing to go away. You're just lucky to even have this thing, or someone's going to screw me over, or who is it going to be? Is it going to be the bank? It's like that waiting for the shoe to drop all the time feeling. And I think that what it seems like you've created with Bloom Money is the ability to combat scarcity mindset in immigrant communities, and maybe also the things that come with it, the inherent byproducts of scarcity mindset, like worrying about the future. And
it's funny that you say that, because one of the things that I've been doing a lot of research around for Bloom specifically is gold in global South communities. I don't know if it's a big thing in the Philippines. I imagine it probably is.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I can ask my mom. It probably in jewelry form.
Well, and you mentioned that your mother
yes.
Kind of had to flee during the revolution and come here. And my nail tech is Vietnamese in London, and she kind of jokingly calls herself one of the boat people because she fled as a baby, or like as a child. She's a refugee. And I have friends who are, children of Somali refugees or just like immigrants. And a very common thread in global South communities is this buying up of gold, because gold is an excellent store of value. And if it is in jewelry form, it can be carried quite quickly. And Jane, my nail tech, specifically mentioned that when they fled Vietnam, her grandmother was sewing gold into their underwear before they got on the boats. And I think about it, and today money is kind of like a bunch of bits, right? And it's like you check your bank account, whatever. I do a lot of work with refugees though, and when you flee, it's like, okay, identity documents, and then like the most amount of money you can carry, and usually that's going to be a piece of gold. And so there's also the psychological attachment to gold. And so, for future products at Bloom, I've been really interested in the way that Paytm in India approached gold and investing in gold, because we have in our psyche like, okay, gold is always going to be there. If you need to grab it and run, when the other shoe drops, which is still like so ingrained in us, we can grab the goal and run. So how can we now think about digitizing this behavior? How can we think about investing in commodities in a digital way for a community that actually for so long has needed the physical thing as well? And that is just one example of diaspora, of immigrant experience, where there are very specific opportunities for financial services that the typical incumbent players are not even thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, tell us about how you really like connect that dot for us, and how, you know, all of these experiences that we've talked about for you led into Bloom, like the creation of Bloom Money.
Yeah, so I think I used to try and tell a wider, like, let me talk to you about the TAM of Bloom story.
Yeah, you don't have to do that here if you don't want.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not going to, because I think what resonates more is Bloom is deeply personal.
Yeah.
And then I realized that my personal experience is replicable across so many other people's lived experiences as well. So I grew up, you know, yes, very privileged in the Silicon Valley. My parents were engineers, but again, we had that scarcity mindset. We also sent money home. So, you know, I remember my dad would put me in the car seat and we'd like drive to this hole in the wall Western Union place, and he'd give them cash and they'd send it on. And to this day, we still send money home to India. The method of sending it has changed, but we still do. And I think what really frustrated me about this is working in fintech. You know, my exes include MasterCard and Starling Bank and Bud and Klarna.
Yeah. Wow.
It was like, cool, we're building some really interesting stuff. But everything that's being built for immigrants is like, let's send money away. Let's send it home. And that's great. Like there's a reason, there's a cultural and familial duty to sending money home. But what about building wealth where we are? And my parents very much benefited from the fact that my aunt immigrated before my mom. And she was working at IBM with her husband. And so they were earning quite well and had enough to find a financial planner and advisor. And so my mom was getting secondhand like advice through my aunt.
Nice.
So my aunt was like, you should set up a 529 fund for Nina, or like, well, I didn't even exist and I wasn't even an idea, right? It was like for your children. My mom was like, what is that? And a 529 is a tax efficient vehicle for education, right? And it was very interesting to starkly see myself compared to other people that I know from immigrant backgrounds who their parents had no idea about, you know, a 529 or various investment vehicles. And now they either are saddled with student loan debt or weren't able to go to uni, whereas I kind of had the privilege of not only doing my bachelor's, but also a master's degree and don't have any student loan debt off the back of that. So this is all to say that Bloom was very much, okay, this immigrant experience is very unique. There are certain behaviors that across every culture are going to be the same. So remittances is one. But then we kept finding this group savings mechanism, which I know from my parents. So in Taiwan and Chinese-speaking places, we call it hui. But in India, we call it chit funds or kitties. My understanding is in Tagalog, it's paliwagan, but it's also called tanda in Mexico and hegbad in Somalia, all these different names for it. And it's very communal, which is another thing that immigrants have in common. When, you know, when VCs talk about community, like a community is not a Slack channel. A community, like...
Say it louder for the people in the back. A community is not a Slack channel, damn it.
A community is not a Slack channel. And I really think you have a community when people are coming together on their own accord within that community. I think you definitely have that with your community. But, you know, the nature of immigrant communities is they do come together because they are outsiders, they're newcomers in a new place, and so they seek familiarity, so they form a community. And so whether that is tied together by the mosque or the church or the market,
right,
there are common physical meeting points, but also common behaviors that tie people together. And so Bloom was born out of realizing that, okay, actually, yes, every culture is unique and beautiful in its own way, and down to even tribal differences, but we are still taking part in some very easily replicable behaviors that can be made into specific financial products and services that are better serving us. And I guarantee you, Barclays and I mean, I'm not picking on Barclays, but like Citibank or whoever, like these high street banks, frankly, don't care. They don't care. And
they don't have any real incentive to care.
They don't. And there's also this misconception that like, oh, immigrants are poor. And while that might be true initially, I very much believe in this concept of build your perfect customer. So just because your perfect customer is not a prime customer today, doesn't mean that they can't be in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
And so with our first product, Bloom Circles, we've digitized an analog behavior, but it actually lends itself very nicely to underwriting because people are putting aside a set amount of money every month or every week or whatever. And so now it's like, oh, cool, we can unlock credit underwriting opportunities here. We can create that perfect customer by helping them build their credit score.
Right.
And now what does that mean for us in terms of, can we go into lending products? Are there very specific things like immigration fees, you know, or legal fees or whatever it might be, small businesses. I think the stat is in the UK, at least, and probably more so in the US, immigrants are 5 times more likely to start a business than their native-born counterparts.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for us in terms of small business growth? Can we build a product around that? It's really exciting, and like the possibilities are endless, and I get so excited about it. And when I try to quantify it, it's like, originally I was like, oh, maybe there's like a few $100 million. Then I was like, oh no, this is $1 billion. Oh, bigger than that.
Yeah.
You know? And so
this is bigger than any audience the bank is after.
Exactly. And so, you know, I really hope that they're paying attention because we are coming for their immigrant customers.
Yeah. So we're coming for you. I mean, it's just one thing I look for. People ask me all the time, what do I look for in a fintech company that I'm interested in, you know, talking or covering or whatever. And for me, it's really about, you know, who's trying to actually get in there and fix the root of a problem, as opposed to putting a Band-Aid over a solution. And so you're getting into, I think, something that's amazing about Immigrants is that communal element, which frankly, all of us are humans and we are communal by nature. Although especially here in the States, it's a very individualistic society, which sucks. It's why road rage is such a thing.
I witnessed it on the way here.
Yes, because we're all selfish, all right? If we could all just do things for each other, we would stop having so much accidents. Anyway,
yes.
I digress there. But and so I like that, you know, I think a lot about how, you know, you really, honestly, you can have it all, but you can't do it all alone. You have to have a community. You have to have people that are going to be there to back you up. You have to have accountability. You have to have all those things. And immigrants know this inherently by being just so tightly knit with our families and, you know, for better or worse. And but to provide that option in money, you know, in saving, in all of that. And that's what Bloom Circle is, right? It's like basically providing that community so that you all can back each other up and then expanding that into other areas. And I think I really love the niche focus of fintech, certain fintech companies. The key is what you're doing, right? Is finding what are you going to do differently than a bank can provide, because you can't just like tie up a banking product and call it specifically for a certain demographic and then hope it's going to work out and it's exactly the same. You have to create a whole different thing. Yeah. And so that's what
I think I really struggled with that because there was a wave for a while of like affinity banks. Love that for us, you know, like content creator banks, like whatever. And I do believe that we are at a point of fintech maturation where we can serve distinct communities better. But for me, it really felt like, you know, to get really nerdy about it, everyone was just doing a different wraparound or different product design on like a Marqeta tech stack and being like, here's your like e-money account with a card. Yeah. And like, that's it. And like maybe you have a few, you know, cashback things that are slightly more focused on the community that you're within. Like if you're a gamer, they would have, you know, discounts on gaming equipment or whatever. But actually, is that solving the core problem here? And I think what's the huge opportunity is what are the behaviors that are different that make it such that this community is not being served well? And I think, unfortunately, the nature of being an immigrant is you are new somewhere. So you are starting from scratch, which doesn't jive well with financial systems. And the needs that you have are outside those of what a native person is going to want. I say native person as in like native born, not Native American. And so it's a huge opportunity. And I think it's a few folks have really done it well. And I hope that we are, joining those ranks of trying at the very least to serve better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and now and I know it's a hard time right now because we raisin, right? Even though interestingly, the news about you having raised came out like a month ago, and now and you're like, but I'm raising again.
Yes.
So please. That's interesting. I mean, I know we're kind of closing out here, but curious, and with my audience and listeners being a lot of other fintech founders in your very shoes, building different things and all for financial inclusion, I hope.
Yeah.
I say into the camera. What's like any advice you got for everyone out there? I know, for your peers.
It is really, I never planned to be a founder.
Mm-hmm.
I was really happy. And again, like immigrant mentality, it was like, get a corporate job, work that corporate job, get your bonus, buy a house, go to Napa for your birthday, all that stuff.
Have some kids.
Yeah, and that is still a wonderful thing to do. And I'm not knocking that at all. And that was the path that I was on.
Mm-hmm.
I was just so obsessed with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I still am. It is so tough. It's up and down. Your audience will understand that. But I'm still excited to wake up every morning and work on Bloom because I know it's so broken.
Mm-hmm.
And in the UK, I live in Lewisham. It's a very immigrant-heavy area. I literally live in the middle of it. It's like I step out into my front doorstep and I call it my life stack. Like I've got a Sri Lankan auntie that does my eyebrows. I've got like my Turkish tailor, a Turkish dry cleaner. Life stack. They're all down one road. And I see the problem every day. So I think that's what motivates me to keep going. I think you just have to have such conviction. And to your point about slapping a Band-Aid over a problem that is going to incrementally change something, like, cool, we saved you like 0.5 basis points on your fees for investment. Like, fine, that's great. But is that what's going to get you through the really hard times?
Yeah.
And I will say this, we are early stage, and eventually, obviously, the metrics will bear itself out. But for now, it is very much, I'm realizing, and it's a very humbling realization, that everyone that has backed us to date has backed us because of our team, because of me. And that's like, it's weird.
I know. It's
like, oh my God.
It's like, me?
Like, it's a lot of pressure. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
And a great honor to have people entrust that and see the passion that you have for solving this problem that you are obsessed with. So that's what's keeping me going at the moment.
Yeah.
Keep your head up. Have a good playlist.
Right. Have a good way to release. Release the wiggle.
I mean, I go boxing. Just release all this
That's
stress
good.
out. So, have your thing that you need to get you through.
Yeah, no, it's good. Music, working out.
All of it.
Yes, maybe good food. Oh. I know. That's what we're about to go do.
Yes.
Well, then my final question for you, Nina, is if we need to be the change that we wish to see, what change do you wish to see in fintech and how do you embody it?
If we want to be the change we wish to see, then the change we must see is, God, it's so...
You're like, I have 500 things to say.
Yeah, there's so many. It's going to sound really touchy-feely, but we need to have more people from diverse backgrounds working in fintech. I don't, frankly, give a shit about the next, like, we're trying to build a platform for high net wealth individuals. Like, I don't care. Like, they are being served.
They got enough platforms.
They've got it. They've got the money. It's fine. I think what's really interesting about our team at Bloom, we are small, but 71% of us come from either first or second generation immigrant households. We have a team member who's brilliant, who was literally born in a refugee camp. And the insights that they are bringing to our product, they're phenomenal. I mean, even little things, when you're early stage and it's like, we're doing a bunch of open banking connections. And so just that by very nature, because our data scientists come from a very specific cultural background, when they go and ask their friends for, can we just have you connect your open banking data, or to their mums or their aunties, it's already like right there. We're not like kind of having to find synthetic data to use. It's like, this is the target demographic that we're trying to serve. And it's right just there. This person's aunt, right? So having a more diverse background, you find the things that you want to call out, the things that are bothering you that aren't quite right, and it informs your product roadmap. It informs your commercial setup. It informs your morals and values as a business. And so I believe it is making us stronger as a team, and it will make our products better and stickier and create that moat that VCs are so obsessed about. And yeah, I mean, if you want to go and like build another thing for high net worth, like fine, I guess that's great. But it'd be cool for you to have someone who doesn't come from that world perhaps be on the team and be like, how do we get everyone who's not high net worth in through that door, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, just thinking outside of the box a bit. So I'd love to see that. And I think that's why you and I both do so much in our own space to get more women into fintech, for example. But everyone, I want everyone. I want all the faces, everyone.
Yeah. Oh, no, well said. My most recent newsletter, I called it the hubris factor, which frankly I have to give credit to Anton Briones, who I talk about a lot on this show. He makes appearances, but he actually helped me kind of formulate this. I think the biggest problem in fintech when I'm asked that question is like the ability to think that you can solve any problem without the people in the room who that problem affects directly. It sounds pretty fucking insane to honestly.
I honestly,
it's
like,
laughable. I'm laughing at you. What are you doing?
The banks were like, we're doing a financial inclusion program. We've set aside a budget of 10 million. I'm like, okay, great, fantastic. Give it to me. I will go speak to the people because they're just going to sit in Canary Wharf or, you know, in the financial district and be like, what do poor people need?
What do poor people need? What do brown people need?
What do brown people need? Let me tell you.
Are you kidding me? They're still trying to figure out what women need, and that's half the population. They're like, what do women need?
Please, just give me the money and I will take care of it.
We'll do it. But that's exactly, like, for me, the Band-Aid in, like, media and representation is like, but we have a diversity section, but we got a women's issue. We do the women's issue, and I'm like, no. Yeah. But we did the women's thing and the women's event, and I'm just like, oh my God. Yeah. And so yeah, for me, it is like, what about just literally instead centering diverse individuals and women as the leaders that they are with the experiences that they have to talk about the business, just like anything else, as front page center news, as opposed to, oh, well, Nicole wrote that story about Sally Krawcheck. So the women's section, and I'm like, but Sally Krawcheck just like did a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe she should go on the front page news instead.
She's actually, and it's like a very skilled banker and operator.
Yeah, maybe instead it shouldn't anyway, but that's like my whole
We're
thing.
Just ranting at each other.
Yes. Anyways, okay, we'll close this out. We have to eat. Nina, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
This was
Nicole,
such a pleasure. So much fun. You'd be surprised. This is like the first time her and I have actually like sat
down
and talked to each other. So it's so exciting.
Besties,
but yes,
though.
we're gonna go eat food. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we did it. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. To hear our next story from another diverse leader, be sure to tune in next week. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our show and give it a 5-star rating, as it helps our message reach more people who want to find belonging too. Thanks for tuning in.